Buenas and happy day. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. This oversight hearing of the Committee on Child Welfare, Youth Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women's Affairs, Disability Services, the Arts, Culture, Historic Preservation, and Agatna Restoration is going to convene regarding the State Historic Preservation Office and is now called to order. Today is Wednesday, March 18, 2026, and the time is 2:03 p.m. In accordance to the open government law, notices for today's hearing were sent to all media stakeholders on March 11 and again on March 16, 2026. Notices were also posted on the Guam Legislature's website and the Guam Public Notices portal. Joining me this afternoon are my colleagues, Senator Perez, Senator and Chairman Christopher Duenas, Senator Taitogi, Vice Speaker and Co-Chair Vincent V. Anthony Ada, and Senator Barnett, as well as Senator Terlahi. Thank you all for being here and for your continued commitment. Before we begin, I would like to call in the Sergeant at Arms to swear in SHPO. Mr. Patrick Lujan, please. And everyone else part of SHPO that will be offering testimony. Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Okay. Under penalty of perjury, do you affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Madam Chair, under oath, you may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. Thank you. Before we begin, I want to briefly review the rules of conduct for today's afternoon's hearing. Written comments or presentations should be provided to the committee. Please provide them to our legislative staff to make copies, or you can also send it through our email, Office of Senator Shelly Calvo at legislature.com. Oral testimony should be summarized within 5 minutes. 5-minute time frame so that all stakeholders and committee members who would like to offer their testimony have the opportunity to participate. Colleagues, I ask that you make the same consideration with your line of questioning. Once you have presented, please remain in the room for any follow-up questions from members of the committee. Questions and comments will be limited to the subject matter on today's agenda, which is the draft 2025 Programmatic Agreement, including proposed updates, consultation requirements, and the anticipated impacts of Guam's historic preservation processes. We gather today not merely to review a procedural document, but to examine a framework that sits at the intersection of federal authority, local governance, and cultural stewardship. The proposed programmatic agreement between Joint Region Marianas and the Guam State Historic Preservation Office attempts to reconcile two enduring realities in Guam. First, our island's strategic role within the national defense posture of the United States. Second, our identity as a place of deep cultural continuity, where the land itself serves as a living archive of Samoa history, memory, and belonging. This agreement seeks to streamline compliance with federal historic preservation requirements under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. It aims to provide predictability in how Department of Defense projects are reviewed, how consultation is conducted, and how adverse effects are addressed. There is merit in clarity. There is value in efficiency. And there is a legitimate public interest in ensuring that necessary infrastructure and defense-related projects are not subject to unnecessary delay. But efficiency, if left unchecked, can narrow our field of vision. So the question before this committee is not whether a programmatic agreement is appropriate. Such agreements are already widely used across jurisdictions. The question is whether this very agreement reflects the full measure of our responsibility to the people of Guam. So we must ask, does this framework merely expedite compliance, or does it strengthen protection? Does it treat consultation as a procedural checkpoint or as a substantive dialogue grounded in respect for cultural knowledge systems? Does it ensure that when impacts to historic properties are unavoidable, mitigation efforts are not simply technical exercises, but as well as meaningful acts of preservation and documentation? We must also consider the structural realities at play. The imbalance of resources and authority between federal agencies and local institutions is not insignificant. The effectiveness of this agreement will depend in no small part on whether Guam State Historic Preservation Office is adequately supported, empowered, and positioned to fulfill its role as a steward of our heritage. Now, I have confidence in Mr. Patrick Lujan, who has served in this position for a number of years. This oversight hearing, however, is a process to inform the general public of our course or pathway. It is a channel to offer updates, as well as to enlighten us on the benefits that such an agreement may offer Guam. So as a chair, I convened this oversight hearing because our community has raised serious concerns about the draft 2025 Programmatic Agreement and what it means for the protection of our cultural and historic resources. This draft is not simply an administrative exercise. It directly affects how we safeguard the places, stories, and ancestral connections that define who we are as a community and stewards of this island. I also want to acknowledge SHPO's recent comments, expressing his willingness to work with this body and with the community to ensure that the draft agreement truly addresses the concerns that have been raised. We appreciate that commitment, and today's hearing is an opportunity for SHPO to provide clarity on his role in this process, to help us understand where things stand in the negotiations with the authors of this agreement, and to walk us through the conservation, transparency, and protective measures that guide this office's work. This clarity is essential if we are to move forward in a way that strengthens, not weakens, our historic preservation framework. So moreover, we must examine how this agreement engages the community, not as an afterthought, but as an essential partner. Cultural preservation is not solely the domain of agencies. It resides in the knowledge, practices, and voices of people. So Guam's history, from ancient Chamorro civilization through periods of colonization and conflict, including World War II, reminds us that the loss of cultural sites is not merely physical. It is a loss of narrative, identity, and continuity. This oversight hearing, therefore, is not adversarial in nature. It is deliberative. It is an exercise in ensuring that governance structures reflect both a practical necessity and moral responsibility. So we look forward to hearing from our federal partners. I hope that they submitted their testimonies, at least. Our local preservation officials, our cultural practitioners, and members of the public. Your testimony will help inform whether this agreement achieves the balance it seeks or whether refinement is still necessary. Seduce Mate for your presence and your commitment to this important discussion. With that, we will now begin. We'd like to begin with State Historic Preservation Office Director Patrick Lujan. You are recognized, sir, when you're ready.
Thank you. That was a beautiful introduction.
Thank you.
Wow.
I worked hard on it last night.
All right. Half a day, everyone. It's me again, Patrick Lujan, Guam State Historic Preservation Officer. I appreciate this committee for continued discussion on this PA. I'd like to personally thank Dr. Robert Underwood. He's probably going to tickle my ears for mentioning his name, but he's the only person so far to reach out and meet with me this week to discuss the implications of solidifying an agreement with the military as opposed to terminating it. So let's talk about the programmatic agreement. Since most of the details and concerns have been brought up in the previous hearings here in the legislature, let me reiterate that this is still in draft form, still open for public comment. We actually have 2 more days with the deadline of March 20th, always open despite that, making it the longest public comment period of 105 days. This coming from fellow professionals who deal with PAs, NEPA, and other such documents. We still do need to have the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation review and comment, but I chose to prioritize our people's comments before the ACHP. We reviewed all 30 comments that came through email so far, majority templated, and have listened to the testimonies given in the 2 public hearings in the last 2 weeks. Some of the things that have been noticed are the following: an obvious error where it required 1 signature. We all know agreements take at least 2 parties. That will be fixed. The topic of traditional cultural properties, that will be added as a stipulation. And also the public notice portions on projects of medium to high sensitivity areas. We're looking into that, where online notices to make those available should be included in the PA. So we've been looking at the comments as we've been getting it and identifying, areas where we can improve it. And then, of course, there's minor but substantive suggestions that we'll take into account. Other notes to point out that I didn't mention last week is that this PA allows consistency across installations. Otherwise, each of the bases will be operating independently on their projects. And this also gives our office a threshold to hold installations to consistent standards for archaeological treatment. Ever the optimist, I appreciate the attention this PA process has attracted, both productive and even the not so productive. Before I yield my time, I do plead once again with this body, the senators and interested parties, that after this PA exercise concludes, that we spend some time on updating our local historic preservation laws. It's long overdue. Without further ado, I appreciate the time again, and I'll be open for questions after Dr. Peterson gives his testimony.
Good afternoon, Senator and senators on the panel. I've been in heritage preservation for over 40 years in Texas, the American Southwest, Hawaii, Guam, and the Philippines, as well as excursions in Ecuador, Mexico, Micronesia, the Congo, Germany, the Caribbean, among other places for archaeological research.
Mr. John.
As well as World Heritage.
Mr. John, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you please state your name for the record?
I'm sorry. Dr. John Peterson. Okay.
Thank you.
I have served as president of the International Committee for Archaeological Heritage Management, part of ICOMOS, since 2019, and was for 6 years on the Texas Historic Preservation Review Board, as well as several local boards in the Rio Grande in Hawaii and on Guam. These boards all oversee aspects of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. I was in Guam from 2007 as director of MARC and assistant vice president for research and graduate studies at the University of Guam. And with Dr. Robert Underwood as president, we had a good run, bringing in many important federal programs like National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation EPSCoR, NASA EPSCoR, the Cooperative Ecosystem Studies Unit program with our first project, the Micronesian Biosecurity Plan, among many others. With all this experience, I can say with certainty that a programmatic agreement for management of historic resources is a good thing. It promotes cooperation, transparency, and protection and preservation of cultural as well as historic places. The Programmatic Agreement is one paragraph in the regulations for National Historic Preservation Act that recommends the PA as a tool for managing development and adverse effects on historic properties. It provides a detailed place-specific protocol for management interactions for review and compliance. This PA, as do most, recommends that certain types of impact are trivial regarding the impact to historic resources. With over 900 reviews a year already completed, it's a waste of everybody's time to review hundreds or thousands more, like painting the window sash on buildings barely 50 years old. The Guam SHPO still gets to review them before they're done, because they are in a binder with dozens of others that receive scrutiny and review and compliance by the office. You can see the reviews of these quarterly reports in the correspondence of the office. The Programmatic Agreement is also a tool for managing the overall resource, the accumulation of data for many projects, and permits a 30,000-foot view of sites arrayed over the landscape. This has already been really important in assessing and evaluating the numerous small artifact scatters and blackened hearth stains scattered over the northern plateau. The Guam SHPO consistently treats these all as significant places and recommends either avoidance or data recovery, and this is leading to a landscape awareness of ephemeral settlement in a water-poor, soils-deficient landscape. The commitment to GIS studies in the PA is extremely important for managing the data as well as the places. The 2011 PA is more explicit and was meant for the buildup and mitigation agreements, but the 2008 and 2025 also support GIS studies and shared data from DoD with Guam SHPO, as well as a significant GIS atlas for military lands. With the PA, it is possible to perceive archaeological landscapes as well as to preserve them. Using the Section 106 approach without a PA requires individual notifications, plans, reports, and eligibility assessments, and concurrences that focus on single undertakings and places, and there is no tool for assessing overall archaeological resources and landscapes, nor for assessing cumulative impacts. The Programmatic Agreement is a tool, not a ding on sich, a thing in itself, as Kant proposed about reality and our perception of it. It can be misused, but a PA in place is more protection for the resource as it provides protocols for tracking undertakings and impacts. For example, the single instance of neglect found in the records of an historic site from the last few years on North Field was tracked in the transmittals and reports of the activity in the cultural resource monitoring. They came in late and may have occasioned a momentary breach, but the process worked, although there was some damage done. It's not clear if it was a Charlie Foxtrot moment, but several things, including the absence of a cultural resource manager at one of the installations, contributed to it, and the incident has raised awareness and improved communications. Without the PA, it would probably not have been noted. No tool is perfect and must be used wisely and consistently. This PA tool needs to be constantly tested and re-examined, and that is why a new one is being proposed to replace the 2008 PA. This one calls for an updated ICRIMP, where cumulative impacts can be assessed through its inventory of activities and actions, reiterates the place and importance of the public access program, provides risk maps as sensitivity areas that the SHPO will share with the public. As I understand it, the PA provides for the planning justifications to make budget requests within the military that support mitigation of unavoidable impacts that otherwise would be unfunded. It also provides the transparent, cooperative agreement to agree that is the basis for MOAs and commitment letters from DoD for a heritage management workforce training program, for Star Cave environmental monitoring, access trails to West Bonya Latte site, and an electronic 106 review process that will make it even less likely that there will be breaches of preservation protocol. We can look forward to commitments for renewed TCP, traditional cultural property studies, among other items that are being discussed as responses to comments from the public review. In the intervening 6 years since I retired from EOG and then returned to work with the SHPO, I have seen an enormous change in preservation management. Before, there was a clear our side of the fence mentality in both camps. Now the DoD environmental managers are Guamanians, and the fence is less opaque. Many of the archaeological texts are now of Guam and not imports from Tennessee and Kansas. The artifacts will be curated at a Guam curation repository funded by DoD and staffed by locals. Reburials are happening with respect to local families and descendants, and the ancient names of the island are returning to places on the DoD maps and landscapes. This is a form of mitigation. The PA doesn't hinder this, it promotes it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. John. Appreciate it. Can we request for these testimonies to be photocopied? If we can actually give it to my staff, my office. Thank you. I understand that there are some people that would like to offer testimony. May I invite Mr. Glenn St. and Mr. Baltazar Ogden to join us in the panel, please? Sorry, sir, we could not hear you. Would you like to sit down and use the microphone, please?
I'm not testifying today. I testified twice already, and my comments are in the public record.
It's already in the record.
Yes.
Thank you. I
Thank
was
you.
just told by my staff that you were interested to render testimony, but I thank you for your testimonies in the past. Sir, may I give you the floor? You're recognized. Please state your name for the record.
Day, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Glenn St. I'm the acting administrator, while my administrator, Michelle Lastimosa, is currently off island. Guam EPA's position statement on the draft 2025 Programmatic Agreement. Thank you for this opportunity to present Guam EPA's position on the draft 2025 PAD between Joint Region Marianas and the Guam State Historical Preservation Office. Guam EPA recognizes the importance of updating the 2008 PA to reflect the scale and complexity of current and future military activities on Guam. The draft 2025 PA provides clearer delineation and responsibilities across Andersen Air Force Base, Navy Base Guam, and Marine Corps Base Camp Blaz. This clarity is essential for ensuring that environmental and cultural resource reviews occur early, consistently, and in coordination with all relevant agencies. We support the PA's improvements in documentation, consultation structure, and public transparency, including the extended 75-day public comment period. These updates strengthen accountability and help ensure that federal undertakings are evaluated with the seriousness our cultural and environmental resources deserve. However, the draft PA still allows certain undertakings to proceed without full project-specific Section 106 review. This occurs through programmatic allowances that exempt some activities from review, phase identification provisions that permit construction to begin before archaeological surveys are complete, and reliance on inadvertent discovery procedures that only take effect after ground disturbance has already occurred. On Guam, where cultural resources are often uncovered during construction, these mechanisms create a real risk that impacts will be identified only after damage has already been taken place. We also note that expanding responsibilities place the Guam SHPO come at a time of reduced federal funding with adequate capacity. Even the strongest procedural framework cannot be fully implemented. Guam EPA urges continued interagency coordination and federal support to ensure that the PA's requirements can be met. Guam EPA remains committed to working collaboratively with SHPO, JRM, and our sister agencies to ensure that environmental protection and cultural stewardship remain central to all federal undertakings on Guam. We advocate for early coordination, avoidance first planning, the transparent decision-making that honors both our natural resources and our Chamorro heritage. Sidus Masi for the opportunity to provide this position statement.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Appreciate your testimonies. If there's no one else to offer testimony, is there any letters to read, testimony to read? Nothing? If so, then I will open the floor to my colleagues for questionings in case they have remarks or questions that they prepared for today. I'd like to recognize my vice chair. Oh, you want to, or you want center? Okay, we'll do. Okay. I'd like to recognize Senator Sabina Paris. Senator, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to SHPO and those that came to testify. So I know there were a couple things that were highlighted in the previous public hearing regarding the shortfalls of this draft 2025 programmatic agreement. And considering your testimony that you wanted to work together, that your intention is to protect our historic sites and cultural sites, is that your intention? Do you still continue with that intention, SHPO, Lujan?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot has been testified in regards to programmatic agreements in general, but not much was, I didn't hear much about specifics according to this programmatic agreement. Can you confirm that, how much of this was actually created by SHPO's office, this draft programmatic agreement?
It's in conjunction with JRM.
Yeah, so what percentage did SHPO write this
I
document?
don't know the percentage. I would say 50-50. I mean, that's what an agreement is. So we sat down and went through different line items.
Okay, and then how long did this process take between SHPO and JRM?
Well, I mean, concerns came up about 3 years ago, as I stated last week, and whether we were going to amend some issues that were of concern by us, operating off of the 08, and it was determined last year that we should just do a rewrite instead of just amending it.
Okay, and then you did not reach out to any local organizations, government entities, cooperating agencies. Did you reach out to any of those groups other than?
During the formation of the draft?
Yes.
No, as I stated in my testimony last week, that we worked with them, and then when we felt that we had a solid product, that was the time to come out.
So you work with JRM, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that is who we have the agreement with.
Okay. So, so are you aware what the definition of consultation is according to the National Historic Preservation Act? Or what does it entail?
This is part of consultation.
Maybe your colleague can also.
Well, yeah, consultation is one of the really genius aspects of the National Historic Preservation Act. Rather than trying to use a club to enforce historic preservation, it uses well-meant consensus-building dialogue, and that's what consultation is. So when people are invited to be consulting members of, for example, a programmatic agreement, they're invited to take part in dialogue about the agreement.
Okay, so considering that testimony, would you say that this draft 2025 Programmatic Agreement, was there appropriate consultation in this draft?
Senator, we are here on draft, and it's open, and we've been getting all the inputs from your office, different offices, the general public. That's the whole intent.
Okay, so if I could just read some things about consultation. What is the appropriate expectation of what a consultation is? Just give me 1 second. Okay, these are the guidelines for consultation. So consultation general principles. Consultation means the process of seeking, discussing, considering the views of others, and where feasible, seeking agreement with them on how historic properties should be identified, considered, and managed. Consultation is built upon the exchange of ideas, not simply providing information. Whether consulting on a specific project or on a broader agency programs, the agency should make its interests and constraints clear at the beginning, make clear any rules, processes, or schedules applicable to consultation, acknowledge others' interests and seek to understand them, develop and consider a full range of options, and try to identify solutions that will leave all parties satisfied. Consultation should include broad efforts to maintain ongoing communication with all those public and private entities that are interested in or affected by the agency's activities, and should not be limited to the consideration of specific projects. Consultation should be undertaken early in the planning stage of any federal action that might affect historic properties. Although time limits may be necessary on specific transactions carried out in the course of consultation, there should be no hard and fast time limit on consultation overall. Consultation on a specific undertaking should proceed until agreement is reached or until it becomes clear to the agency that agreement cannot be reached. So it goes on that, so the agency needs to inform other agencies, organizations, and the public in a timely manner about its projects and programs, about the possibility of impacts on historic resources of interest to them. However, the agency cannot force a group to express its views or participate in consultation, and these groups bear a responsibility once they have been made aware that a federal agency is interested in their views to provide them a suitable format and in a timely fashion. So there are many things about consultation, and so what seems to be missing is the inclusion of other groups, even our local government, other than the SHPO's office, in this draft, in a span of over 3 years. So comment, I just want to make it clear that comment and consultation is not the same. You know, comment is after, when everything's developed, right? You've developed it. Consultation is early on. And so that's what I want to make clear, that there is a lack of consultation in this draft 2025 PA. So that's one issue. And the problem with that is that the outcome of the draft really has, you know, the way the draft appears is really shows a lot of the gaps. And so I just want to point out, like, maybe we can go through line section by section, but for instance, in the whereas clause, in the second to the last one, it says, whereas Commander Joint Region Marianas finds that a programmatic approach in accordance with 36 CFR section 800.1414 is the appropriate approach to address the circumstances of routine and redundant operations, maintenance, repair activities, and. So it highlights one aspect in which programmatic agreements are used, but in looking at the document itself, there's nothing redundant about what is to come in the body of the stipulations. So some of the issues that our constituents that provided testimony on Resolution 144, they stated, first, for instance, it expands the scope. Right, it expands the scope to not just Navy undertakings, but Department of Defense undertakings. And so that's really concerning, because if you look at the definition of undertaking, according to the National Historic Preservation Act, it is, quote, a project, activity, or program funded in whole or in part under the direct or indirect jurisdiction of a federal agency per the National Historic Preservation Act. So, undertaking. So, is everything funded by the federal government? Who gets to determine what is considered a Department of Defense undertaking? If we're talking about funded in whole or in part, direct or indirect jurisdiction. And so this scope is really concerning because now we have a streamlined document that's going to cover potentially any activity, which we don't get to determine that it's a DoD undertaking. So that is one of the main issues behind this programmatic agreement. If you meant to streamline it, it does so, but then again, we are unaware. We do not have, it lacks the transparency of how these historic sites, maybe Lujan, if you can comment on that.
I don't know why you say lack transparency. This is as transparent as it's going to get. We're exposing being transparent with this draft. You keep saying that it's lack transparency. We're accepting all the comments, your comments, every person's comment, and we're going to reply to them. So I don't know why you keep pushing that there's lack transparency. We've come up with what we feel is a decent agreement that's going to be beneficial to the island. We're exposing it. We're not hiding anything. This is it. We're taking the comments and adjusting it where we feel it's going to be more beneficial or tightening things up. So I'm not sure, did we have you sit at the table when we were making, adjustments to the 08? That's between me and them as signatories to this PA. And when we felt that we had something fairly decent, we felt comfortable to share it with everybody and to make comment. So I take offense to where you say transparency. The other issues that you do have, I think you have a lot of questions within what your statement had. If you can put that in writing, and we can get those answers to you on your concerns.
So see that I think there's a misunderstanding here because you're talking about one thing, I'm talking about another. This is an agreement that's going to cover a blanket activities, basically undertakings which we don't know beforehand. Normally, every agreement should have a list of, like for instance, there's nothing in Appendix A, which is the JRM land holdings. There's nothing listed in Appendix B. And so again, the National Historic Preservation Act is very specific. It actually says that for those lands in which is not held by the agency, they still have to do their due diligence when it comes to consultation, which means they have to identify properties, which there isn't any properties identified in this agreement. That's what I mean by transparency. Where are the properties? The second thing is there's nothing to assess any adverse impacts. That's what I mean by transparency. There's nothing here in this agreement that states adverse impacts. There's nothing in this agreement that says anything about what it's going to do to avoid these impacts. Of course, we want to avoid it rather than mitigate it. And so that's what I mean by transparency. There is this blanket word that's covering every activity, whether it's direct or indirect, partly or wholly funded. And so we don't get to determine what undertaking is covered. That's what I mean by transparency. There's no definition of what project is covered under this agreement.
Thank you,
It's
Senator.
a hollow agreement.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to allow Mr. Patrick to expound on his comments and answer your question with regard to transparency. And because you have consumed already the 5 minutes, we can circle back again with you. Sorry. You may yield your time later, but I can circle back again to you, Senator, just so I can give time to my other colleagues that are sitting here. Mr. Patrick,
Yeah, so
you're recognized.
the biggest thing here, it's mapping, right, of the sensitivity, archaeological sensitivity. We don't know what they're going to build on them, right? So as far as transparency, I don't even know what they're going to build on them. What we've done is establish an archaeological sensitivity mapping system, which we were not comfortable with the 08, and we forced their hand to update that. And it's a living document where it will continue to be updated. That's part of the PA, is to update the GIS, right? And so if we find something that's on what we call a green zone or low to no probability or sensitivity, that's going to change the approach from an archaeological standpoint to medium or high. If you're asking for what projects they're doing, we don't know, but we will when the time comes. And so in that sense, we're willing to have, we're going to work with, I was talking to Carlotta this morning and say, if there's a mechanism to get us on a website where we can put these projects on a weekly basis, as suggested by one of my biggest critics, right, last week, but also then you go back to that local procurement process where every year we have to procure for our website to keep it alive, right? So we're trying to find mechanisms to overcome that and do what, that was a great suggestion for the public that we're going to take into consideration and hopefully, pull that off and have more transparency for the public, when it comes not only to DOD projects, but hey, we'll put all our federal projects out there, federal highways and, fish and wildlife, whatever, US EPA. So that's one good thing that we're taking out of this exercise.
Thank you for your answer to Senator Paris's question. And thank you, Senator Paris, for your questions. I'll circle back at you later. I'd like to recognize now Senator Christopher Dueñas. You're recognized, sir.
Just Masi, Madam Chair, and thank you, Pat and Mr. John. Your last name again? Sorry, Peterson. Thank you for being here, and as well as EPA, Mr. St. Nicholas. Pat, I think it's important that we frame this once again. So what we're discussing here is a framework that has a timeline for comment and that requires 2 signatories to be implemented. Can you just expand on that?
So there is no rush to sign this because we're still operating off of the 2008. I, as the end user on the local government side, have a little sense of urgency to sign it because it's a better document that I believe, and people that I've worked with or work with believe the same thing, right? And there's benefits to it. So in the sense of timing, we can sit here and go over this draft for 3 years, like she mentioned last week. But who wants to do that when we can proceed and operate off of a different framework? So in that sense, yes.
I want to put that in perspective, Pat, because I think there's this thought process that we're rushing into something, but right now we don't have an improvement to the 2008, correct?
We don't have an improvement to the 2008? I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah, so this is an update. This is an improvement to the current agreement that's being operated under.
That's correct.
So it moves with us or moves without us?
It will move with us or move without us, yes.
So what you prepared for and what's currently still open for comment is the desire by the SHPO and for Guam to have a better seat at the table than we currently have with this basically the update of the PA.
Not necessarily a better seat at the table because we have a seat at the table.
An improved agreement, I'm sorry.
Correct.
I correct myself. An
Yes.
improved agreement.
Yes, correct.
So, Mr. Peterson, because you were at the University of Guam prior and you've seen, obviously in your testimony, many iterations of this process, Can you describe this process and this improvement to the process that you've reviewed in terms of its efficacy and comparable to other jurisdictions and other projects along this scope?
There are a couple of areas that are come to mind immediately, and one is the previous, what were called, they were probability maps in the 2008 agreement, based upon knowledge of archaeology and expectations about what might be in an area, but without any real field testing or field data. And the new one is based, the sensitivity maps are based upon an accumulation of actual data from field projects over the last 20 or 17 years that have been incorporated into a very robust GIS system. And so it's a much more real tool for doing the planning and to determine if areas are very likely to produce archaeological sites, or maybe modest numbers, or maybe none at all, the sensitivity areas. And we've made some advances in dealing with the maps too, and after some dialogue that Patrick's been involved with some of the JRM people, they've agreed that whereas they cannot share those maps, the SHPO can.
I shared it with them.
Okay. And so that's an advance, I think, and came out of a lot of that testimony last week too, and the week before, because that is a real concern. People do need to see the areas, and in fact, they can be planners in the sense that they may see areas that they know of or where they have family histories or so forth that contributes to that knowledge of the sites. The other area where there's an improvement is previously in the 2008 PA, there was an ICRIMP, which is an installation cultural resource plan, which is required by federal law to be done every 5 years by federal installations, DOD at least. And the previous one was done in 2005, I think, and that was 3 years old at the time of the 2008 PA, right? And so they said, well, within 5 years there should be another one. This PA calls for one to be done within 2 years after the signing, and then every 5 years after that. So that's a big improvement, meaning that that data that's been accumulating and the concerns about cumulative impacts and that kind of thing can be addressed fairly quickly, because this is a more robust planning tool than the 2008 was. First, it was based on probabilistic studies, expectations, speculation. This is based on real data. It intends to incorporate the ICRIMP findings into this sensitivity mapping as the process continues. So it's a much more robust planning tool. It's a great improvement in that regard.
This is for both of you, basically. It's going to come off as rhetorical, but I just think it's important for the record. Obviously, 2008, now we're in 2006. This framework and this agreement, along with all of the advances in technology and all of the resources we currently have, by doing this update, does it bring us then so much closer to, I think you said it in your statement earlier, but I want to get it more in detail on the record. Does it make it now our probability of providing information, providing the co-management of sites as found, and the like, so much more likely because of our ability to use information and technology as a much larger resource as opposed to what was designed under 2008?
Yes, Senator, plus the cooperation between the agencies, because there is a commitment in all the PAs to share the GIS data between Navy and Air Force and the SHPO. So yes, that the technological advances, but also the commitment to cooperation.
Pat, I just gotta, I can't help but be direct, but a direct question. What would be the impact of basically stopping this process or throwing this process out?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it's not going to stop any projects. It's either you drive on the left-hand side of the car or the right-hand side. We're going to go down the same road. What it does is, without this is really a holistic approach to a massive view of things, right? In the sense, Department of Defense, if we go away from the PA, then it becomes piece by piece, project by project, puzzle by puzzle. You know, instead of looking at it holistically, it'll be you know. And so what happens is if something happens over at Camp Blas, something happens up at Anderson, something happens down at Big Navy, you know, it can come into us in different forms. And they all have their own cultural resource management teams. They all have their own tendencies and their own ways. We tried that before without the programmatic agreement framework, and it got confusing, right? For us as the recipients of the local government, because they had their own ways of doing things. That's what's gonna happen again, right? It's gonna be onesies, twosies coming in. And then you don't have like he said, the cumulative impact of what the front end planning scheme of the sensitivity mapping, right? That doesn't come into play when you go piece by piece, project by project. It just makes it a lot more difficult for us to keep track. It's a lot more difficult for them as well, because they benefit from it as well, because they are working within the same framework, right? And mind you, anything outside of this, from whatever other project that doesn't coincide with the PA, they still have to submit 106 reviews if it doesn't fall within the PA. So it doesn't mean like everything that they do is going to be, you know, in this framework. If it's not within the framework, they have to go through 106.
You know, Pat, while not perfect, certainly, as nothing ever will be, my observation sitting from this side of the table, when I look at the 2008 agreement and this attempt, with the comment period, all the comments and all the participation and the like, while it's not going to be perfect, it seems like if we were to go back, it seems like it's going backwards to just throw everything out and not at least move forward with what we got here in this update, because everything you're telling me seems to tell me that we have so much better positioning now and so much more, like you said, I misspoke by not having a seat at the table, but having not only a seat, but more involvement and more interaction and more clear guidelines that are laid out here. It seems like it would be a bad idea to just abandon that.
Yes, I truly believe so, Senator. And we've mentioned it last week in last week's hearing about the commitment that they've done, and we've had 4 major items that they committed to do. It's not right now within the PA, but it's connected to the PA, and it's going to be evolving. The reason why is, for instance, they've committed to invest in our college students, right, to pay for a master's program to get them in as SOI qualified archaeologists, right? That's one of the things that I made sure that they're going to be committed to attach to this PA. Our SHPO portal, right? We're far into the program already. They've already initiated these investments into what we do, even before the evolution of this draft came about, right? So it's a partnership that we've had, knowing and pushing with these big, you know, the big target on their back is like, you need to invest in our island, and I've been pushing that on my end, right? West Bonya, Ladi said, a beautiful Ladi said, in Fena, right? I'm pushing for public access so we can, our locals can go in there. You know, obviously it depends on if they're moving bombs, you know, there's going to be times where it's not going to be accessible. But I have that in writing now, right? It was a verbal agreement with Admiral Minoni that I had on the side. Now I have that in writing. So they are investing beyond just this framework into our community as much as I can, right? So working with UOG, getting an accredited, you know, having students apply for these scholarships that they're going to pay for to get us into those, you know, into the next generation. Because I left the office for 9 years. When I came back, it was still the same archaeologists. We did not build new ones, right? So that's my initiative, is to get that for the next generation. Hopefully it's our local people that's going to take advantage of this, you know, and strengthen us for the next generation. So that's one of the other things that we're getting out of this PA.
Mr. St. Nicholas, thank you once again for the testimony. It sounded mostly favorable to advancing from the 2008, but there are a couple items that were pointed out. Are those recorded as comments from EPA to the SHPO?
Actually, this is our comments we're making today.
Can you move a little closer to the mic because we can hear you so well?
The comments we're making today is going to be recorded and basically forwarded to the SHPO for their consideration. I guess some of the concerns that we brought up was some of the exemptions that they identified under the sensitive areas, you know, that would not require further investigation or archaeological studies based on previous studies that were done. But, you know, a lot of the earthwork that is done on the island, even after an archaeological study has been conducted, may also uncover other artifacts that were missed prior. So, you know, those are our concerns, because basically these are exempt from further archaeological studies. So that's something that, you know, we thought that would be worth bringing up and putting out there. That in the event there is an artifact that is found, that, you know, that the SHPO was contacted immediately in this process. And it's just in general, you know, it could be, you know, we're talking about archaeological excavations, but it could be historical preservation. You know, if you have a historical building that needed to be renovated, the same language could hold true that is in the draft that says that, you know, similar materials would be used. And it's across the board, but I think that if they include the SHPO's input in that, maybe similar materials could be a decision that they make and consider. An example would be, you know, some of the historical homes that were built down in Iran. They use EFIT, but it's from the Philippines. But if you were to use the same language, similar materials, they could have used mahogany, or they should have used other materials that were, you know, similar, but not, you know, in the same species of wood that we would consider for that reconstruction.
Yeah, so Pat, could you address that? That comment can be incorporated?
Yeah, those instances, Glenn, won't be part of this PA. So it's not part of like a construction. We would focus on that from a historic architectural standpoint, right? And there's a whole different analysis that goes into historic structures. So stuff like that cannot go into this framework. It will be addressed probably highly likely just as a 106 review.
So, Mr. Peterson, in all of the areas I think of Hawaii that you enumerate that you've done this kind of work in, can you speak maybe to their agreements and whether ours is equally as durable?
Probably Texas was the best environment for looking at these agreements. Hawaii, and I was there in the early part of the 20s, and it was kind of chaotic. They had a lot of sudden changes of SHPO. And there wasn't a lot of continuity or consistency in the office. But Texas has always had a really, really good, solid system where there's a superb online GIS system and site recording system. It's available to qualified people, an archaeological contractor, a government agent, anyone. They have, if you, a hobbyist, an avocationalist could get access if they apply and show that they're not going to use their access to loot sites and so forth. But anyway, it's a very sophisticated site management system. And the agreements that are formed there are almost always, like some of the big agencies, we did several large reservoir projects, and they started with a programmatic agreement. And there you have a finite goal, the building of that reservoir, and there was a process where there would be survey and then evaluation and then protection of the sites. It was a little more clean cut. The DoD projects are ongoing and sometimes changing, so it's a little less predictable in that sense. But Texas had a really good review system within the agency and a good reputation with the advisory council if there was ever any kind of dispute. I was on the Preservation Board, which is what oversees those agreements, and we reviewed National Register nominations for the state. And I'm hoping that the Guam Review Board will take on some of those same responsibilities here. In other states and polities, they're actually deeply involved in the sort of professional vetting of these kinds of things. But I'm not aware that this board has been a particularly active preservation board for a while. I was on it back in the early part of the aughts, but not for many years. So yeah, I mean, there have been a few states that have been really exemplary, like I'd say Texas and California. Many are sort of, you know, mediocre, like unfortunately Hawaii, partly because of leadership. But they all are following the same general guidelines set by the Park Service, National Park Service, and the Advisory Council.
Pat, I want to address compliance. I have a view, but you know, I just want to see if you share it. I mean, do you see the signed agreement compliance as being your notification, everything else that's contained in there, as the State Historic Preservation Office and Officer to review and implement whatever's in the agreement in terms of avoidance as well as preservation?
Can you repeat the question? Do I
So
feel?
There's a question of compliance, and I'm not saying I disagree with it, but I look at compliance as compliance to the agreement. Do you agree?
Sure. I agree that it's.
Because I mean, I guess the reason why I'm asking is, how could you possibly envision all the potential projects going forward to know project by project? Isn't the agreement supposed to be sort of the roadmap on how you address things?
It will, yeah. So you know, it doesn't preclude the notification of projects. It doesn't, and so we're still going to see it. As a matter of fact, one of the adjustments, and this is minuscule, but since we're at the table here, there's a part of the process where they used to tell us after the fact in the 08 that they've done this because it fell within the low to no probability, and they agreed that we're going to move that notification to the front end to give us a quick bird's eye view that it's coming. They don't need our concurrence or our action to it, but at least they're gonna give us that sight vision at the front end, and without needing our. Now, if I see something there and I'm like, maybe we got to take a look at that, then I can jump in and say something about it. So that's another good thing and a big difference between this version and the old version.
I just want to address one comment that's been in the media as well, because I think it's important. So you basically say, look, we don't enter in disagreement, we don't allow this to go forward as the framework set. Basically, then we're operating outside of the process.
No, we're just going to operate on a different process, which is more difficult. Yeah.
Outside of what could be, I suppose my question
Correct.
is.
Yes.
That's all I have for now, Madam Chair. I want to thank you folks for your work. Just a quick comment. I mean, I don't want to ever dismiss, and I think you never will either, Pat or anyone in this room, the fact that there have been problematic problems historically.
Yeah. We're trying to fix that.
What we can do is ensure that we've got the best possible ability of avoiding that going forward.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm interested in this debate and this consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Appreciate that. Mr. Pat, before I called in and recognize another colleague of mine, would you like to expound more on the last question that was posted? No? All right. At this point, I'd like to recognize Senator Tello Taitagui. Senator, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, if I could just go last at this point. I just walked in and allow my colleagues to go ahead of me. I just kind of came in late. Thank you.
No worries, Senator. Thank you. Senator Barnett, you're recognized, sir.
Sidus Masi, Madam Chair, and thank you again to the panel for your presence today. And Si Diyos masi to the people of Guam watching on our YouTube and Docomo and GTA streams. And just want to thank you for having this hearing. And I look forward to the roundtable that was also cemented in the previous hearing with SHPO. So thank you for that. But I did kind of want to talk about some of the comments made relative to what the resolution and the efforts of my colleagues to really have this stance about the withdrawal of the 2025 draft programmatic agreement. And I think just based on what we're hearing today, the way I interpret it is you had the SHPO and Joint Region Marianas putting together this draft PA with no consultation from really any outside partners, any cultural groups, any concerned citizens. And so like all the other agreements we've had with the military, we enter this comment period, and the comments are largely ignored because although the SHPO had a seat at the table in negotiating this agreement, most other people who have concerns about this process and agreements moving forward didn't have a seat at the table. So we hear all too often from our constituents as we go through the comment period after comment period that their comments really fall on deaf ears. So I know, SHPO, that you've said in the last couple hearings that there are comments that you plan to address and hopefully integrate into the draft agreement, but I think that's just philosophically where we disagree. And I also kind of disagree with this idea that if we scrap this 2025 agreement, like Resolution 144-38 calls for, that we're going to now enter into some kind of uncharted territory, when it's my understanding that we'll just keep operating off the 2008 programmatic agreement. And so I absolutely support going back to the drawing board and including the consultation and including the voices of the different community sectors so that we can have an agreement, a real agreement, you know, not just an agreement between you and Joint Region Marianas, but an agreement that the people of Guam by and large can get behind and support. And so that's I just wanted to kind of clarify our stance, and then also what I think is, and you know, SHPO, you said that there's no rush in getting this thing signed, but then you also said that you want to hurry up and get it signed because you believe that there are 4 areas of improvement in the agreement. But in just talking to concerned citizens and constituents, I think what they're facing here is having a comment on an expansive draft programmatic agreement that has, you know, many changes and stipulations that our people who don't have an expertise in this kind of thing struggle to even understand. And so I think that we would have more informed opinions and informed comments if we were involved with the process, you know, from the beginning of the drafting. And so, and that's where I think we bring up the transparency and the accountability, right? So if it's you and JRM in a closed door, and granted that's your authority, the agreement that you come out with, you know, when other eyes start to see it, I think that's where we're having this issue where we're concerned about the reporting that only goes to the SHPO and not to the people of Guam, and we're concerned about, just as you know, all of the different testimonies that we receive. So I guess if you want to respond to that, is there anything that prevents us, prevents the SHPO, prevents the government of Guam from going to Joint Region and saying, hey, Lana, you know, our people aren't really supporting this, so let's go back to the drawing board and let's do it, I don't want to say better, but differently, because I agree, no agreement's going to be perfect, and we're not asking for perfect, we're just asking for better, you know, and we're asking that the concerns of our people be included in this, no matter how long it takes. So if you did want to respond to those comments.
So you're asking to start this process all over?
Is there anything that would prevent us from, or you from telling your partners at Joint Region Marianas that, you know, there's been a significant public outcry, there's been significant concern shared by duly elected representatives of the people, and, you know, using your better judgment, you now feel that we should start the process over and get more consultation at the table, and other people representing the interests of Guam at the table. Is there anything that prevents you from doing that?
I'm just wondering how that draft would look if we start all over. Because basically we didn't start from scratch. We had an existing PA, and we started to massage. So to start all over, I'm not sure if that's going to benefit the island. I think 105 days
is it possible though?
I think 105 days of being open for public comment was enough time to gather. And like I said, it's not set to close.
Respectfully, I just have to disagree with that, because the issue, as we've explained, as Senator Perez has explained, is that the people of Guam and other voices outside of yours were not included from the beginning. And so now we're being forced to submit comments on an agreement that a large segment of our community doesn't understand, let alone support.
Yeah, and I respectfully disagree with that too. That I think starting from scratch, we've got a product that we're looking at. So I don't see the benefit of starting from a blank paper when we have something to work off of, and we're listening to the public, we're listening to the calls here. So instead of rebuilding, we've offered you what we feel is a viable agreement, and we've been open and honest with you guys. And I don't know how beneficial it will be if we start from scratch when we're offering this openness to make comment.
Right.
If you don't like a portion, you can say that, and we'll look at it. At the end of the day, I'm the one that's operating this agreement. You guys are going to be going off and making policy and law, and I'm going to be stuck with the ball. And so I think my perspective should mean the most when it comes to this PA, because this is my daily. This is what I do, and I am listening to every single comment that comes through these hearings and through my emails and everything else that the protesters that are outside my door. I'm listening to them as well. So I'm willing to listen to you, but I don't think starting from scratch is going to be any much more beneficial at the end.
But do you believe that you have the authority to go over to your partners at Joint Region Marianas and say that you want to start over and go back to the drawing board and include the consultation throughout the process from the start? Do you have that authority? Is there anything that would prevent you other than you disagree with us?
Do I have the authority? Yeah, I have the authority.
So you can?
I can.
So you could go back to the drawing board and you could say, everybody who's got concerns, people who want to be in a consulting role, have a seat at the table, have a voice in the conversation. You absolutely could do that, but you just choose not to.
I think I have a good product already, and we're open to suggestions, and we're taking them, and we're adjusting accordingly.
So do you think that this product that you say is a better product could be improved
Absolutely.
upon?
Yeah.
So that could have been done in the process where we would have people who were able to consult in the drafting of it. Because I'm not trying to denigrate or cheapen your work, Pat. It's that, it's my experience that the more eyes we have on a lot of these things,
Sure.
whether it's a programmatic agreement or a lease for Eagles Field, the more eyes we have on it during the process, the better it is. So, I don't want to, I'm not trying to make this personal and say that, you don't know what you're doing, or, I just think anytime we have someone unilaterally making these decisions, without input into the process from, stakeholders, elected officials even, I think that's why we're where we're at today. And I know, you're an intelligent guy, and I know that you can understand that these concerns are very legitimate, and this kind of dismissive attitude that, I did it, it's a good agreement, just give me your comments. It's just dismissive and almost in some ways counterproductive to, what we're trying to do as elected representatives in speaking for our people and trying to give them the opportunity also to speak for themselves.
So I cannot say yes or no right now if I'm going to start all over.
But do you also agree that if we started all over, we would be operating under the parameters of the 2008 Programmatic Agreement?
We are still working off of the program.
Right,
yes.
right. So if we were to withdraw this, we would not go into some kind of jungle rules area. We just keep going the way we're going now under the 2008 Programmatic Agreement.
I would suggest that are we far off as far as having a good document? Are we that far off that we have to start from scratch?
No, I'm just saying because you guys have painted this narrative that if we withdraw the Programmatic Agreement, it's going to be, for lack of a better term, and I don't like using it, jungle rules. But in reality, we're just going to proceed operating under the 2008 Programmatic Agreement. And
well, your
if this were to be
resolution calls
withdrawn,
for the termination of the 08, correct? Also, or is it just the 25? What was your resolution?
It could be amended.
To amend the 08?
Sorry, we can amend that to.
Oh, you're going to amend the resolution.
Definitely,
okay.
we're hard on withdrawing the 25. That's really different.
no. I know my time's up, Madam Chair.
I'll consider it
Yeah.
of starting from scratch. I don't think that's the best way, but with your suggestion, I'll consider it.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be starting from scratch with a brand new notebook. Maybe we start from scratch and you have this as your baseline backboard and you bring
That's
in those
basically what it is. It's a baseline that we can work with it now.
Again, where we're disagreeing is you're saying that people
Consider
can
this
make
the consultation period.
Commentary is different than consultation. I think we've already established that on the record. And that's where I'm coming from, is we absolutely should have the ability to consult different stakeholders, should have input from the beginning of the process and not have to sort through this, problematic agreement, as you yourself have called it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Masi, Madam Chair. Sorry, dispensa, and thank you for the time.
No worries. Thank you, Senator Burnett. Mr.
No comment.
Patrick, no comment.
Yeah.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to recognize Senator Terlahi.
Thank you. All right, I have a couple questions, and I guess so. There is no risk right now of terminating the 2008 in the event the 2025 draft does not proceed, right? I mean, we still have time to negotiate a 2025 or 25-6 draft, correct? All right, and then, but I do acknowledge some of the improvements that you stated, and I wanted to ask specifically, is there anything in the 2008 agreement right now that prevents you from using updated sensitivity maps or the GIS system that you want to use?
That's a good question. They don't technically have to, but John, maybe he can answer that question more than me. On the sensitivity maps, can we use the new ones that we adapted to?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the 2008 calls for that other set of maps that are attached to the 2008 agreement, but I see no reason why they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And in effect, you use them, don't you, when you're reviewing a project? Because
I mean, these are fresh, so we've just kind of been working with them in recent times. So, yeah, we'd be looking at the new ones.
All right, so your office for sure could use it, whether they agreed to that or not. And you could tell them.
Because it's a planning tool,
think
yes.
Yes, and then you could also probably get an agreement with them, just that we're going to use these updated maps as well as the other maps that they're using, sure. Right? Mm-hmm. And I think there would be no objection to that. And then the 4 projects that you cite that the Navy's willing to agree to, in his November 14, 2025 letter, the Admiral says he's giving you an update on these several shared interests and the projects that you mentioned, like the West Bunyan Latisite hiking trail. He doesn't mention at all that these are, his willingness to go forward on these is tied to our updating the 2008 agreement. So I would...
That's one of the things we're going to make a connection to.
Well,
yes.
I'm saying maybe you don't need to, because he's willing to go forward with them and just go forward with them. independent. And that's how we should be negotiating this. If he's willing, and he's already said he's willing, that these are great ideas, and you've advocated for them very well, move forward. You don't need to tie anything else to it necessarily, I mean, unless it's going to additionally benefit us. And I'll hopefully show you soon why I think you should just do that. And there's nothing in the 2008 that prevents you from doing that either. You can do that kind of independently, like you've been doing already. And the cultural resource plan, according to Dr. Peterson, says that this new PA will allow us to review it every 2 years as opposed to every 5 years. So that would be, or at least in the beginning?
Within the first 2 years of the PA, and then every 5 years after.
Okay, so it just gives us a new one to begin with, and then we're going to go back to the regular rule that we're under right now. Okay, and even that, the cultural resource plan, would you think that they would object to just making that amendment, that you're just going to follow the new cultural resource plan in light of it's been so many years since 2008? And I'm glad to hear, Dr. Peterson, that you concur that the SHPO has that ability to share maps if he doesn't see that there's a risk of them being looted or anything. And is there, there are other things that I guess for me were not included in the new draft. And that's kind of the point that I want to make, right? I don't want to, this is not anything personal. It's only like, this is a matter of negotiation. Can we get more? And I think we should, because I think things have changed enough that we should. And first of all, I'm very concerned about that change to our disadvantage, I think, to allow this scope to increase without some, we're balancing that huge increase of scope from Navy projects only to all DoD projects for all, for anything that we don't even know about right now. Yeah. And that's what we're going to include. And so I feel like that's huge. That's so big that we should see concretely some huge concessions on their part for that, I think. But we don't necessarily see that. And so there's just certain little things that, I mean,
so
are big
all
things,
the installations are Navy property.
Pardon?
So all the installations are Navy property. They're Navy land. It falls under the Department of Navy. So all the undertakings covers all the installations.
Yeah, all the installation are JRM now, Joint Region, not just the Navy. It used to be just the Navy under 2008.
No, but they're talking about Navy property, the undertaking. So that is all encompassing of all of Navy property.
All of the Department of Defense properties, correct?
Falls under Department of Navy on Guam.
Okay,
yes.
But so you agree with me that we're now expanding the scope from what used to be smaller to now all properties on Guam owned by the military?
I think the other one was expansive as well. It wasn't just particularly to Naval Base Guam. It was everything.
All right, and then it also expands it to properties that they acquire coming, right?
Yeah, so that concern, it's under discussion, right? Because from our standpoint, and I'm not sure if that's something that we can, we'll look at that that line item a lot more, because at least from our eyes, let's say they do for whatever reason acquire more property, and if it's not archaeologically surveyed, then we're going to have an issue with that, and they're still going to have to go through that process no matter what.
They're still going to have to survey it.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean they're going to have to go through any new process. They're going to be allowed to use this PA. We will have no new negotiations. We will have no opportunity for public input on the properties that they might affect.
Well, I think
that's the problem.
Yeah, I think on that scale, ma'am, we are going to be focusing on just the archaeological side. I think there's going to be a different.
I know, but that's what we're talking about here, the archaeological side.
Yeah,
That's
we'll
what
do
this
our
new
part on
PA precludes. Well, you're kind of implying that it might preclude that by this comment period, this is the public input. This is the consultation with the public or with the people of Guam, the indigenous people, anybody who might have ties to these properties that will be affected. We don't know what those are. We don't know what the effects are because those haven't been outlined yet. And then we don't have any clear process in here that they will be consulted or their input will be considered at that time either, when you do know what those projects are. That's the whole point. And that's the point because that's what the NHPA says. When it talks about consulting with the public, it says they have to know the nature of the involvement. It's their views are essential, but in order for their views to, be known, they have to know exactly what properties are going to be affected and what the effect is going to be on those properties so that they can say, well, that takes away my ancestors' farming ground, or that takes away, you're talking about moving burials that might be my ancestors' burials. And they're precluded from that kind of input. I mean, it's not something that was locked in. Neither was the use of LiDAR or any other new technology instead of just clearing, when they, it doesn't also, this is the biggest part. I said this at the last hearing after you left. This new agreement empower you to force them to avoid that destruction of a place that they declare to be necessary. It didn't help us at all in that regard. That's how they've been able to clear all properties because they deem it necessary, we've been trying to help you, but we're unable to stop them, to pause them, stop them, anything if they deem it necessary. And that's what I would hope we can negotiate at least something in that regard, because that's the crux of the matter, right? It says if they deem it necessary, then they will clear it according to archaeological guidelines.
Thank you, Senator. Right? I'm gonna give the floor to Mr. Patrick so he can comment or answer these questions.
Yeah, so once again, I mean, if those concerns, if you can put it in writing and we can analyze it. But I can share that there's two instances that the PA framework was a success, and that was with Camp Bloss, with the burials that they avoided, right? They had the plan was to have a parking lot, and we worked with them to avoid further disturbance, and they moved the parking lot, and they built a memorial there. Same thing with Andy South on their training and exercise area. That was another success story where they avoided a burial site and went around it. And so those are all within, working through.
Those are kind of up to what you guys decide at the time, correct? It's not guaranteed how they're going to act because there were also properties up there on that base that they did not avoid, correct? And they moved them. And
that's no different, ma'am. That's no different from working with a private landowner or anything.
And I'm just saying this is a huge scale of an agreement we're trying to make with them. And so that's why I expect a huge scale. Like there's nothing in here that talks about cumulative impacts. It says Dr. Peterson said we're able to account for it better because of the reporting and it's going to be electronic. But it doesn't say how we're going to mitigate that.
Senator, I apologize, but we already exhausted the 5 minutes, so I'd like to give our other colleagues a chance, and then we can circle back. Thank you. Thank you for those questions. At this point, I'd like to recognize Senator Taitagui.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you and my colleagues. Of course, those who are at the panel, thank you so much for being here. Mr. Nicholas, always a pleasure to see you, and I'm happy you're here because a lot of this stuff really is like a collaboration and another set of eyes, you know, what's going on as far as environment is concerned. But Mr. Nicholas, I do have a question to you. Other than EPA, what other agencies do you think that would collaborate with this programmatic agreement, other than EPA?
Department of Ag.
Department of Agriculture, okay.
Yeah,
So
so they have their, you know, because you have endangered species in.
Can you just come, bring the mic closer to you? Yeah, I know you're a good singer, I've heard you in church, so just bring that thing up close.
Yeah, Department of Agriculture, Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources.
Okay.
Should comment on the.
Should be
programmatic
commenting,
agreement
right.
Because some of the properties that they're clearing may have endangered species that they need to address as well. Under Section 7, which is a part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife mandates as well. So aside from Guam EPA, we actually have a, you know, I'm not sure of any other agencies that review military plans, but we do. And it's, you know, it's an undertaking when you receive applications in, you know, hundreds of pages long, and you have to review it and to ensure that they address all environmental concerns. So we actually are very, you know, we are definitely in line with the review process, and it does help that, you know, there's joint region that kind of quarterbacks the whole process, because otherwise we'd be dealing with different branches of military, which could be problematic in itself. So, and I believe that the 2025 addresses that concern as well, having a central point of contact for that, which would definitely help move things along in the review process.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. So Patrick, have you engaged at all with Department of Agriculture?
Not pertaining to this PA, no.
Okay, well, if you can, you get an opportunity, or just, you know, either the oversight chair to also reach out for maybe any testimonies they may provide this body on the oversight to clear those up. We mentioned, I was here in the last two roundtables or briefings. This is now an oversight, a little bit different. But one of the things that I think I took away from that, which I was really happy about, is the roundtable that's going to happen. I'm sorry I had to step out during the hearing today for a little bit, but was there any mention as to when you're scheduling that roundtable?
Nothing new. I requested 2 weeks after May 20th, so we're still targeting that. We haven't said any logistics as far as the date, the time, the location. So
it'll be 2 weeks after tomorrow? Is that what you said?
After 2 days from now. So
2 weeks from now?
Don't hold me to like exactly 2 weeks. Give us time to accumulate, but I will get back to my oversight chairwoman to set something up.
Okay, so but you did say around 2 weeks after the okay.
Around 2 weeks, we should have something by then.
And it's the 20th is the deadline, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's midnight tonight on the 20th, right? So if anybody
Is
has,
it? Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Right? Okay, so just for those who are listening, anyone who have any comments on this, they still have the opportunity to email you until midnight tonight, correct? Okay.
Or anytime.
Or anytime.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, you'll still receive them. Speaking of which, what is the advisory council you mentioned in your testimony? Who is on that advisory council?
The Advisory Council for Historic Preservation is actually a federal agency in Washington, D.C. So they are the ones that address any type of disagreements between parties, whether it's a federal agency and a state, or a federal agency or a federal agency. And so they're a federal agency of their own. So, you know, it's another tool. Instead of going through litigation, in cases where our office and whatever federal agency disagree on something, we can take it to the advisory council for their recommendation. So they look at all the PAs nationwide, and so usually that's part of the process of their review as well.
Have they had an opportunity to chime in on this draft PA?
Not yet. So I mentioned in my testimony that I went with public comment to get the people's comments first before sending it off to them, because obviously we're going to adjust it, right, based off of the comments. And so once we get a more solidified PA, then that's the time to go to the ACHP to get their comments.
So is it safe to say that after we've had the round table and you've got more information and maybe some corrections here and there that you might have missed, that's when you'll be going to the advisory council?
It'll probably be a good time to
After?
go. Yes.
Okay, afterwards. So we're still looking at some timelines here that have to be met down the road. Okay, the other question I had was, one of the biggest concerns I had, Patrick, was it mentioned that the signature of the PA, once it's been completed, we're still under that assumption and that change to be made that it will be 2 signatures, yours as well as, okay. So,
has to be, yes.
Okay, 2, that's what I thought, okay. And has there been any reports, Patrick, since the implementation of this programmatic agreement in 2008, has there been any reports of any agreements made in this contract that was not fulfilled, or other reports of agreements that were fulfilled, so that we can look at a timeline of everything that was reached in this agreement so far to date? Has that report been put together?
Like the quarterly reports, there's been some times where it was delayed or late. That's because they would have personnel change. But generally speaking, they've submitted those. They caught up.
And are those reports during the time you've been at as a SHPO?
Yes.
You've been up to date on the quarterly reports?
I'd have to check with my archaeologists. They look at it primarily, and then I'll make sure. I have to check with my crew.
Okay, are these quarterly reports on the website?
Not on our website. It might be on JRM's website, but that's something that we can be putting on our website as well.
Yeah, I think it would be really good if you did. You keep up with everything and put it on your website, so even the public. We talk about transparency. I think that's the first comment you made when you sat down, when you got back from your off-island trip, that you're all about transparency. So I hope you keep that to fruition. Okay, other than that, I don't really have any more questions. A lot of them were asked earlier, so I greatly appreciate your work and the leeway you're giving the public to continue on, even though after the 20th is gone, that you'll still accept it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taituki. I'd like to recognize Chair of this committee, Vice Chair, and the Anthony Ada, Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon to everyone for being here. And I think, Pat, when you first opened up, you brought it up in the very beginning, and this is still a draft form that, comments are still coming in, commentary is still coming in. So I think that whatever adjustments need to be made, that perhaps you'll be able to look at them, evaluate, and then see how you'll be able to implement them if, it becomes one of those things that you want to look at, right? So does SHPO currently have a staffing and technical resources necessary to meet the review timelines on what that's established in the PA?
It would be always nice to have more employees to get things going on a quicker scale, but I'm content knowing the limitations of both the local and federal governments. I understand the role that we play within the community, and therefore I think I've got a good solid team that, though higher numbers would probably turn things around quicker, we've got a pretty, I'm not going to complain. The current position that we're in right now is probably the best I've been in since I've come back to the office.
Yeah, that's good to hear. You were talking earlier about the portal, and this portal make things better for this 2025
absolutely
agreement.
Yeah, so we're still working off of hard copy, right? We're asking our customers to drop off hard copies for us to review, and we're in 2026. We've got to get with the program, right, and get into the electronic phase. And so here's the initiative that I pushed forward with partnership with JRM that they're investing in. So they've put in a lot of investment already, that we're hoping at any given time we can go to electronic submittal. Now, this is only for 106s for federal agencies, and we're hoping to eventually evolve into, it's going to be something similar to what EPA has, where they have their internal tracking system, right? Also for local permitting. So we're going to expand it to our local permitting reviews as well, and everything would be, and they're investing in that. So we're happy about that.
And I think that's part of the transparency portion of all this, right? Is where now you'll be able to go and see how each project is moving along and what's going on with these projects. Perhaps maps that are also included with these projects as well, right?
The customers can see the process. I can see it from the back of because usually right now, it's within the office, and I have to go see where a current project is at. With this portal system, it's there. It's with Dr. Peterson's, and it's been on his desk for 75 days. That'll never happen. But I can go up to him and say, "Hey, man, how come it's been with you for this amount of time?" So that type of transparency, not only internally, but the customer can see it instead of calling us or stopping by. It's like, okay, it's there. It's almost ready. So it's pretty cool. We're moving forward for that.
And I think that's what's important to understand, is that though the 2008 agreement back then was perhaps good for the time, but moving forward and advancing, especially with technology that we have today, and ensuring that when we look at a project, we know the status of the project, we know where it's going, we know where it's at, where it's located. Yeah. So I think that as long as we continue to keep, I don't know how much longer you keep your comments open, or suggestions, I think you guys are on the right track in that part of keeping that transparency going. And the other part is, I think it's now the government of Guam's side to come on board, right? Because now you guys are moving to technology, and we need to do the same thing so that it works hand in hand with the federal and the local government, where now we'd be able to share a little bit more information and perhaps know where that local project is going as well, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, I know there was that initiative with DPW back in the day for the electronic permitting, and we're part of that process. So, we're taking it upon ourselves to do it internally, to do our own tracking system. With no, the local government is not even paying for this. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge benefit in this sense. And then hopefully it could be taken, like with the success story of building ours, and who knows, DPW can incorporate it, based off of that.
Yeah, because I think you were mentioning that EPA also is working on a portal as well. Am I correct?
Actually, we've had the Walters software system. It was paid for by our region contractor, and now we're in the process of trying to obtain that contractor, because that contract's now done. But basically, it's Walters system is a permitting system, the tracking systems for complaints, for permits, and projects. So it's the water, air, and land electronic record keeping system. And what that does is that when permits come in, to include the military permits that come directly to Guam EPA, our permit team disseminates it internally to the 5 programs that have to review it. And at the same time, everybody's reviewing the projects and communicating directly to the applicants the shortfalls so that we can continue the review process. So whenever there's a discrepancy, we put a hold on the review until additional information is submitted. And oftentimes that's where the delay happens. The delay happens because permits are incomplete. People don't realize that. We don't just hold permits for the sake of holding permits.
Right.
But that same process could be utilized, instead of just internally, it could be Department of Public Works, and then the programs within Guam EPA could be the agencies of Guam EPA. And I think that's a start. It's very effective. I think on the military projects, though, there's a lot of, it's classified, controlled, unclassified information that it's kind of very similar to for official use only types that we have to identify. We also have to get trained to get clearance to be able to review those permits as well. So not all permits are going to be available to the public, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that update as well. Pat, how would the public access plan be implemented in a way that ensures both the community access and the protection of sensitive sites?
Yeah, so over the years, the public access plan, now I'm speaking on behalf of GRM, they started as a collateral duty, right? And then they evolved into where it was a bona fide employee, full-time employee, that was the public access coordinator. And she did a wonderful job. They hired, one of our local girls, and she built that up. Fortunately or unfortunately, she had another opportunity to go into a different position, a higher position, which she did, and that left that position vacant. So now it's back to collateral duty under their environmental section. So we're going to continue to push that. That was an issue that I sent another email or a letter to the Admiral in January with concern of having that public access plan alive and well.
Oh, that's good to hear. I think maybe just my last comment would be, I know you were born and raised here. You have kids.
I do.
Your family.
Yep.
Guam is home.
Yes,
and
sir.
I think for all of us, right, Guam is home. And I think that you always have the best interests of our island and our community, most especially the environment that you're sworn to protect, first and foremost. Am I correct?
Amen.
So, I believe that you being the steward of SHPO, that you'll have the best interests of our island always at the forefront. And the work that you put into this draft 2025 PA, I believe that you continue to good work on that. And in the end, it's all of us that's going to come out and say, you're going to need the support, we need to give you the support, right?
Yeah.
And I think, Mr. Lahan, that over the years that you have been doing this, I haven't had any complaints, or I've heard any complaints about you in the way you've managed the office and the things that you have done there. So, I think that something from 2008 to now 2025, and it's still in a draft form, that we still can put in comments and still look forward to having you address those issues and those comments to come out with the best PA for 2025, I leave in your hands. So thank you for all the hard work that you and your team have done and that you continue to do. And, you're probably going to be sitting there in that seat for another 10, 15 years, who knows, maybe 20 years. But, all the work that you continue to do and will do for our island, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We do take our job seriously. We are stewards of our island, and it's deeper than a job.
Definitely, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Vice Speaker, and thank you for your response, Mr. Patrick. Before I circle back to my colleagues, I'd like to throw in a couple of questions myself. You mentioned earlier, Mr. Patrick, that you've already collected suggestions and that there's already some kind of deliberation and that some of the suggestions would be considered in updating whatever current PA we have at the moment, correct? Could you state a few of that suggestions that you received that you are actually considering to include?
Sure. You know, I had it in my testimony, but your guy took it for Xerox and I didn't get it back. Let me guess. One of it, you know,
whatever is not here.
Yeah.
For the record.
It's on the second page. Yeah. Oh, so, you know, the obvious typo, right, for the one signature, the topic of traditional cultural properties, we're gonna make that as a stipulation that's gonna be conducted within, you know, what, 5 years maybe, right? That's pretty reasonable. Again, talking about the public notice, those are three big ones that just jumps up that we know we're gonna adjust. We know it. That's gonna happen. And then just getting more, you know, there's other ones. There's Tetra Tech. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that advisory company. So they are known to work on NEPA and PA documentation. They've been working with Vera Tapastia and her group, so they've analyzed the PEA and have made some comments of that. So we're going to take a look at what the professional consultation firm says about it, all of it. So we're looking at all angles, from, you know, the legislative views to consulting views to the, you know, the activists. We're looking at it all.
Thank you. Aside from these three, so far, these are the ones that are being considered because we're still trying to collect more testimonies and suggestions, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. Is there any long-term monitoring mechanisms that are in place to ensure commitments made today are actually upheld? Sure, no problem. I ask if there is a long-term monitoring mechanism that are in place to ensure commitments made today are actually upheld and honored.
You mean on the field in archaeological?
Yes.
Yeah, very much so, and it's negotiated in every project, and it's in all the planning, all the plans for that are templates for the plans, that monitoring will be done. Even if there's been relatively modest recoveries maybe on testing on a project, always there still will be monitoring just to make sure, because the danger of inadvertent discoveries is quite high. And that would especially be the case in the high and moderate sensitivity areas, but even in the low sensitivity areas, there would often be monitoring. And then there also is training usually and awareness for the construction contractors, backhoe operators and people out in the field, that they are actually advised about reporting discoveries, and there can be severe penalties for the companies if those aren't adhered to. So it's pretty much a standard in the DoD and defense industries.
So in line with that, there would also be like progress reports or any postings of whatever work is being done and how it progresses? You know, is there any like progress report in any work, in any construction site? Are we?
So
sure.
our view is specifically with archaeology, right?
Yeah.
Once there's a clearance, and if the building starts to go up, that's already we're past our jurisdiction. So, you know, if a building is already, you know, put their foundation, we're clear. We're working with the archaeological firm to close up the report. So again, our focus is specifically on the ground level.
Ground level. Thank you for your answer. Just curious on the ethical and legal considerations. Are there any conflicts that you guys have encountered, conflicts of interest among consultants, contractors, or reviewing bodies that public should be aware of?
I don't think so.
Nothing?
No.
Just out of curiosity, gotta throw it out there.
Sure.
Earlier, you mentioned, Mr. Patrick, that if we don't have this system in place, then we will have a different type of system. Can you expound on what, the worst scenario if we don't have this in place?
The worst scenario, they're just gonna be putting in these individual requests for review, project by project, grant by grant, even, changing the light bulbs, painting the roof, painting the rails. We're gonna see all of that. So this is where the streamlining comes into play, where projects like that don't necessarily have to go under our review, because that'll inundate, our workload. So those are one of the benefits of putting together a programmatic review, a programmatic agreement. Obviously, we will clear it initially, saying, okay, this building has no historic significance, right? It's 20 years old, or maybe it's been redesigned so many times that it lost its historic significance, but they're still going to get funding for it. And so, again, the beauty of the federal law is that all the federal grants has to be concurred or looked at from the Historic Preservation Office. But also, to work smarter and not necessarily harder is to go through and adapt these programmatic agreements for stuff like that. It's like, hey, you don't need to tell me if you're gonna, paint the railings or change the light bulbs. We get that from Department of Energy, right? So, there would be a nationwide PA for Department of Energy grants that says, hey, if there's a building that's under 45 years old and doesn't reach the threshold of being historic in value, then you don't have to go to the 106 process. So it's not it's fairly used, it's fairly often for different aspects of the federal government.
So in hindsight, we can actually, it could be detrimental. We could lose control in the process in some areas or some instances.
I mean, lose control. I mean, that's going to be up to me and my staff, because we try not to lose control of what's going on out there. Sometimes we lose control of what's going on outside the fence, and that's where you guys can help out with that, with stronger laws. But I think we try to track the federal contracts as best as we can. And again, looking at their cultural resource management teams that each installation has, they have it properly equivalent to our staff, and we have to look at the entire island. That's no excuse to any type of oversight, but it is what it is. When they outnumber us in how many archaeologists we have or how many technicians that we have. And that's where we have to be good partners with them and abide by, the code of ethics that archaeologists possess. That hopefully they come up and, maybe there's pressure from the military side, but we're counting on that archaeologist that works in that installation to step up and say, no, we have to do this, right? No different than any other code of ethics that we encounter from any profession.
Thank you for your answer. My last question. Will all reports, findings, and consultation records be made fully accessible to the public? And if so, where?
That's a good question. I would love to make it all accessible. and we will try to make it. So again, like we brought up earlier, having a robust online presence, you know, we're looking at it. We're really looking at it, and I brought that up to the front office. See how we can overcome, you know, your procurement problems and make sure we have something that's alive and well 365, right? And so we'll work on that.
We all want the same thing, to
Sure.
be progressive, to streamline process, and to, of course, offer accountability to the people of Guam.
Sure.
That would be my last question, and thank you for indulging me with your answers. But I'd like to circle back to my colleagues and see if they have further questions. And colleagues, if you guys don't mind, perhaps we'll do a 3-minute round this time. Thank you.
I don't know if 3 minutes is a good enough time, but this is an oversight. So it's a very big, important document. And so, you know, I think that, you know, I agree with my colleagues that, you know, consultation hasn't happened. And for that reason, we're ending up with what I consider a problematic agreement. And you have to look at the fine print. The fine print is what's going to tell you what's not there. And so one of the issues, stipulation 3. So if you have a document to go along with, you know, basically, there's significant structural gaps in this document, considering there's a complete absence of any affirmative community benefit provisions. It's structured entirely around compliance and process. So I just want to share with the listening public that my resolution 144, the author's report, is coming out. And so it has a lot of, it highlighted a lot of the loopholes and defects in this draft. And it really took the collective to come together and figure this out. It can't happen just with one party. I'm glad the public came out and were able to highlight some of the issues. And so, of course, the issues, as you mentioned, the expansive scope, that is very concerning. You know, we're just noticing the bulldozing at the firing range. There's new bulldozing there. And that was a result of a programmatic agreement. And if we're saying programmatic agreements are here to protect our historic sites, that is a result of a programmatic agreement. And so what I'm trying to do here and with you, in collaboration with you, is to how do we prevent mistakes from recurring? Because there is issues with this draft. And I pointed out some in the earlier, I believe last week, that there was an issue of only one signatory, issues of notification, quarterly reporting that does not include medium and high archaeological sites. How is that left out? It was also left out in this draft programmatic agreement. And the medium and high archaeological sites are the ones that we are irreplaceable. There was also talk about, what if it's not no or low archaeological sensitive sites? What if it becomes a medium to high? Sometimes when you dig, you don't know for sure what's there. And so that is really also, you know, a concern when things are categorized. The other thing that's mentioned was the discretionary power of the military. They have the discretion to determine what is historic sites, and it's according to what's stated in this particular draft. There's no, it's silent about, as far as the SHPO's office, having some say in that. The other disturbing thing is the dispute resolution. And so if we're talking about decolonization, which I'm sure, Patrick, you're very aware of, is that, you know, why are we leaving it up to one party, the military in this case, to have that discretionary power when we have disputes? You know, we saw with the firing range, there were 14 known historic sites removed completely, 80 other known historic eligible sites. And so this is just one project, and we haven't had the full accounting of this 2008 programmatic agreement to really go forward and using it as a template for this upcoming programmatic agreement. And so that's, I think, what really needs to take place first and foremost, is what are the cumulative impacts? We don't have the Guam synthesis study, which documents all of these data recovery that has existed, which is basically a salvage archaeology or clearing of a historic site, which is the irreplaceable loss of our cultural resources. And so, you know, it's really hard to see it. I mean, we're not seeing it here in this public hearing room. We're kind of disconnected from what's going on outside, but when we go outside, we see the destruction that is happening along the roads. It's very difficult to see this. And here we are engaging in a new version of a programmatic agreement, which to me is problematic because there are so many loopholes, and I don't have time in this time that was allotted by the oversight chair to really go through each of them. But it leaves a lot of discretionary power to the Department of Defense. It streamlines it for their benefit at the expense of cultural preservation and historic preservation. I mean, I could sum it up in that regards, but I'll be happy to share some of the findings of that author's report. You know, it's silent in a lot of places where it shouldn't be silent. So for instance, you know, one of the things that was brought up is when they come across burials, bones, you're not notified till very later on in the process. So again, who has the entitlement over our potential ancestors? So it's, you know, we don't have access to that. It's a lot of it's discretionary power when it comes to human remains, when it comes to historic sites, naming historic sites. And have we actually, has it been fully complied? Has these other programmatic agreements been fully complied? It has not, because we know for sure that the access plan is not in operation right now. The Guam synthesis study is not available, it's not up to date. And historic eligibility, I mean, we don't have, do we have that? Maybe that's a question. Are all of these programmatic agreements, have they complied to this today for the stipulations that they included?
Thank you, Senator.
So that was a question.
I'm very impressed with how versed you are with the topic. I'd like to see item by item on the gaps and loopholes that you call, and stipulation 3, and we'll look at it. And I'm willing to sit down with you and go over those loopholes so we can cover them. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Senator
Sorry, if I can
Dueñas?
ask one more question. Just one more question.
Okay, one more question.
So can you clarify, Patrick, if this PA were to become in effect, what would be a Section 106 process? Because this is going to cover all DoD undertakings. This programmatic agreement is going to cover all DoD undertakings.
Yeah.
You said that there's going to be a Section 106 process. So what project is going to be covered under that versus this potential PA?
I gave an example of, you know, painting railings. That doesn't fall under this PA. I'm just giving you an example. And anything that falls under, and I gave you the map there, anything that falls under the yellow or red, which is medium or high, kicks in 106-like procedures. They don't go and do what they want on the medium and high areas. They are heavily scrutinized just like a 106 is. Things that they quote unquote would get by is on the low to medium, which we have already signed off of, right? We're like, this is clear. We deem this that there's nothing there or very minimal chance, and that's based off of data. That's based off of surveys, right? But if you're going to touch the yellow or red, the kicks in. It's just going to be like a 106. They have to come in and consult with us. That's when we're going to take deeper dives. That's the holistic look at this. Not everything that they're going to do is going to be done at their will. That's not how this works.
It doesn't say that.
That's how it is. It look at the PA.
This draft doesn't say that.
All right. Let's talk after, because
To this Masi. Senator Dueñas, you're recognized.
This Masi, just a couple of follow-ups, Pat. Terminating the 2008 agreement, bad or good, and why?
not too good, because we're going to go back to the piecemeal approach.
That makes us further away from being able to,
Yeah, we're going backwards, yeah.
going backwards from historic preservation. Pat, how long do you think it would take to try to get an update to the 2008 agreement, which you're trying to do here? How long do you think it would take us?
Based off of the comments that are coming in, well, you know, I've promised Senator Taitigui over, what is it, a roundtable discussion to identify the adjustments that we've made from the initial draft with the comments that we are going to incorporate it. I will sit down with the fine Senator Perez here to look at her loopholes to try and see how we can cover up those. And I hope and pray that we have, you know, and confident that we'll have a solid second round of draft within 2 weeks of tomorrow.
Does terminating a process ever make it better?
No.
I mean, I look at it as a final comment, and I'm asking these questions because I understand the thought process, and I understand, you know, the approach to trying to mitigate and trying to work through concerns, and I understand all voices need to be heard. No, you know, full stop. What I think is that without progress, we go nowhere. And I just want to say that I appreciate the work that you've done. I appreciate that you have, you know, assistants. And I appreciate the fact that you've recognized that you have a lot more infrastructure than you've had in the past. And I can only think that terminating this process is going backwards for us. I think the work that you've done has brought us a lot closer to being able to provide for that oversight and mitigation. And if we've gone from 2008 to here to get movement and improvement, then, and your commitment to hear out all of the comments and vet those as well, I don't see how this is ever not going to be a living document. But you have to have something at some point to be able to improve on what you have and to continue to, it seems to me, and I just want this to be my last question to you, to improve this process and to put in place what needs to be put in place. I mean, I can't help but, I guess I'm asking myself this question, but I want your answer, to think that we have moved so much further than where we were and have so much more opportunity to progress.
Honestly, Senator, I'll be very truthful. Within the powers of the SHPO, I can sign this without any of this public comment within the confines of the federal law. But I chose not to. I chose to go out to the public and get comment. So this is extending my consultation period with the community, getting their input.
This is not consultation period, please, right?
Tomatoes,
Dr.
tomatoes.
Peterson?
You have your 3 minutes, Senator.
Yeah.
Senator.
So I'm using this, right? Whether I got the comments before we did the draft, I figured that as subject matter experts, we can present to you something viable as opposed to bringing comments in when we don't have anything viable. And I believe that we've done that. But really, you know, I have the power to sign this right now, but I chose to get public comment before we proceed on because I feel that we all should have a say in something like this. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be me that's gonna hold this ball and run with it.
Dr. Peterson, do you think that this is a marked improvement from the 2008 agreement and a roadmap that'll take us much further than we've ever been in terms of this oversight?
Well, yes, as I said earlier, I think it is. And I also wanted to make a comment about Senator Perez's concerns, and they're rightful concerns. But the CRM, the Cultural Resource Manager on a base, for example, does not make a determination about historic eligibility. They make a recommendation to the SHPO, and the SHPO makes a determination. So all of that takes place in the reporting on a project. So if an archaeological contractor finds a site and he says, we think this is an eligible site, he recommends that to the CRM. The CRM sends forward the report to the SHPO. He responds with a review, and the determination is from the SHPO. Another item is having to do with burial. Anytime
Point of information, it actually states if CGRM determines the find to be not eligible for inclusion, the project will not proceed following.
Senator, it's Senator Dueñas's time, please.
Just a point of information.
Thank you.
If any human skeletal material is found, project has to stop immediately until the CRM and the SHPO are informed. That, at least that's in the PA, all the PAs. So if it ever happened that was out of bounds, it should not have happened. Sometimes things happen that shouldn't happen, but the point of these rules is to try to catch those things and stop them before they become destructive. Yeah, so anyway, I think all the PAs contain those clauses, and those are kind of the standard protocols that are followed in the field. So I think this one includes those, but also has some additional benefits.
Pat, my final question is this. Is there anything that would stop activity going forward? Any effort, any throwing out of a PA, anything that, would anything stop what's going forward right now?
No, sir. In my experience, like for instance, the building of Camp Blas, we've put certain areas on pause based off of findings, but it never stopped the project from proceeding.
So the best thing is to be part of this process.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. I'd like to recognize once again Senator Terlai.
Thank you. And I just want to point out that Senator Paris pointed out that on page 8 of this drafted PA says that CJRM is the one making the determination as to whether it's eligible or not. So, yeah, I'm not sure why we keep disputing that. She's pointing out what she sees in this document, and she's pointed out so many things in this document that can be improved.
I'm okay with that.
But yeah, we're getting senators saying that, this is such a great way to go forward, when really, a lot of it's not an improvement going forward. Like you just said about the, who makes determination for eligibility, the archaeological sensitivity sites, they're just going to proceed like a Section 106. It's kind of like no additional protections or anything. And in fact, and that process is, if they determine that they can't avoid it, then data recovery, meaning clearing the property, is going to be done. And CJRM will submit their plan of how to do that, and they don't even have to complete excavation of the entire site. They just have to take a sampling of it, or what do they call it, until they reach redundancy, and you have 30 days to review, and if not, then they proceed. And it's that whole, this agreement is very much similar to the other agreement, where we do not have any power to really force them to avoid data recovery of a site that they determine is, that they're not able to avoid. And so that's what I'm asking is, if we have a negotiating power, then that's kind of what we should do. These PAs are very helpful, right? They can make your work easier. They can make it streamlined, as you say. By giving you more time to review, I think would make it easier, as opposed to excluding from your review different things. That should be your option, not theirs. Give you more time to review, give you more resources, like some that was negotiated in prior PAs. The PAs could give additional input for the public in addition to the minimum 106 process. It could give them a heads up on what impacts we're looking at. It could give them a heads up on the cumulative impacts that we're looking at. It could give them additional access. It could give them additional formal recognition of these places. It could give them new facilities, like we talked about in previous PAs. But what does the resolution that Senator Perez drafted ask for is pretty much an accounting of the 2008 PA so that we know what was good and what we were able to enforce there, what we did not like about it, like this parts, the parts where they get to go ahead upon their own decision that they can't be avoided. And then, so I wanted to ask you, Mr. Lujan, in the resolution, do you disagree with any of the whereas clauses? So I know that...
I disagree since the first whereas about the termination.
The first whereas?
Or the first ask.
The resolved clauses, yeah. I see we have a disagreement in the resolved clauses, but all the whereas clauses, including on page 2, it says that no publicly accessible report has been issued documenting the outcomes of the 2008 Programmatic Agreement, including the number of projects conducted, sites disturbed or preserved, ancestral remains encountered, or disputes resolved. Things like this, I think if you look at it, you would find them very reasonable, and that this is just kind of our concerns. And if you agree with our concerns and could say that, we would have less of a disagreement here as opposed to saying everything's great. And I can see one of her whereas clause says, because this PA, the new PA that you drafted includes the scope. This says the large-scale and high-impact military projects, including the missile defense system, are included within the scope of the draft 2025 Programmatic Agreement, despite their significant environmental, cultural, and social consequences. And that's just one example. And the other thing that it points out is that things that we don't, other projects that might come forward that we don't know anything about. And
thank you, Senator Therese. Your time is up.
Madam Chair, please,
One more question. One more question.
Thank you. So another archaeologist testified that withdrawal, if we do what this resolution, just saying to withdraw this agreement at this time, not to terminate it or but to just draw this new draft and work on it that you've made and work on a new draft, that would require JRM to continue to stay engaged on negotiating a new draft. And so I'm thinking that we can agree to just withdraw going forward on the 2025 draft that we have before us, agree to engage in a new process going forward, I mean, not a new process, but just a new draft going forward. And in the meantime, the 2008 continues to apply, and in the meantime, hopefully you get some of those things that I think should be already easy for them to agree to, like the new maps, the new GIS, the new those new projects the admirals already agreed to. Do you agree that we can see a consensus here?
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Patrick, if you may.
I don't have any further comment.
That's just very troubling.
Well, in 2 weeks, we'll have the roundtable, so we look forward to that continuation.
I offer that you put these suggestions in writing, and we are going to evaluate them, the gaps, the loopholes, the suggestions, and we will take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize Vice Speaker Ada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pat, probably one last question from me is, are there any formal mechanisms for the resolving of disagreements or inconsistencies in the
yes,
implementation?
And, that's what the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation is. That's their sole purpose, is to resolve conflicts between two parties.
Yeah, so there is a formal process that we
Absolutely.
go through. So it's just not going to go to the wayside, and it's not going to be paid attention to?
Yes. So if we disagree with the military or whoever we have the PA with, we'll send it to the advisory council for further review.
Okay, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Oh,
And
Madam
again,
Chair.
thank you for your participation today in the oversight hearing. I
Thank you.
truly appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so
Sorry,
much, Vice Speaker.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
You
Yes.
sworn them to tell the truth, but yet I'm hearing so much inconsistencies with this draft. It makes me wonder whether they have read this draft.
Mr. Director Patrick earlier already stated that if there are other further concerns and questions that we might want to pose and get clarification, we can email him. And in 2 weeks, we convene for a roundtable. So we could prepare once again and tackle this issue further. But for now, I think we've given enough time for everybody to actually state their questions and concerns, and I trust that the panel obviously will take on all these concerns and questions, and obviously we continue our deliberation. On that note, sedus mase to all who have participated in today's hearing. Mr. Patrick Lujan, Mr. John Peterson, and of course, Mr. Glenn St. Nicholas. I truly appreciate that you guys are here, and as well as all my colleagues that participated today. What we have heard today reflects both the promise and the complexity of the proposed programmatic agreement between Joint Region Marianas and the Guam State Historic Preservation Office. On one hand, the agreement offers a structured framework, one that could improve coordination, provide clarity, and introduce consistency into the review of Department Defense undertakings. On the other, it raises enduring questions about how we define stewardship, how we value cultural resources, and how decisions are made when competing priorities converge. It is clear that the process matters, but process alone is not sufficient. The integrity of this agreement will ultimately be measured not by how efficiently it moves projects forward, but by how faithfully it also preserves what cannot be replaced. We are reminded that historic properties are not simply assets to be cataloged. They are places of meaning, they carry stories, and predate modern governance structures and will, if protected, endure beyond them. As legislators, we are tasked with more than an oversight. We are entrusted with ensuring that systems we endorse reflect the values we claim to uphold. That includes a commitment to transparency in decision-making so that the public can clearly understand how and why decisions are made. And that's why we continue to work on this programmatic agreement. Second, a respect for cultural knowledge and community voices to recognize that preservation is strongest when it is informed by those who carry its history, the traditions, the community, not just us, leaders, legislators, agencies, but the whole people of Guam itself. Third, a commitment to cooperation among all facilitating parties to ensure that discussions promote collaboration and shared problem solving rather than opposition or adversity. And lastly, a recognition that development and preservation are not mutually exclusive, but responsibilities that must be carefully and intentionally balanced through thoughtful compromise and a shared commitment to progress. Today's testimony also made clear that we are identifying very real loopholes, from the omission of crucial appendices to the lack of cooperation needed to fully understand the draft, to the absence of meaningful incorporation of public concerns, and to inclusion of other issues. These gaps place us in situations that echo past historical agreements between Department of War, now the Department of Defense, Department of Defense, now Department of War, and SHPO. Those agreements did not serve the people of Guam well in the past. We need only to look at the failed hospital complex in Barrigada, or the contamination of our water lens from the continued use of dildrine long after it had been banned, to understand the consequences of inadequate oversight and imbalanced agreements. So what we're looking here is really balance and not repeating past mistakes. So further, as someone who genuinely supports progress, I recognize the importance of striking a responsible balance. And that's really why I decided to hold an oversight, for us to have a compromise, balance, and work further on the Programmatic Agreement 2025. So as policymakers, it is crucial that we carve a clearer pathway, one that meets the necessities of development while respecting the rights and heritage of our community. We must remain mindful about these rights, but also progress for Guam, for our people, especially this time that we have certain challenges around our community. So our well-being and concerns for the people of Guam can never come second. Yet, as it stands, we have no clear way of knowing whether the protectors required under Section 106 have been fully addressed, overlooked, or treated with indifference. So that will be work in progress that my office, obviously, and along with my colleagues in 38th Legislature, would be very, very obliged to work with your office, Mr. Patrick. So this committee will continue its review of the testimony and documentation presented today. Where necessary, we will seek clarification, propose recommendation, and ensure that this agreement, if implemented, serves the people of Guam with integrity. And we thank all the stakeholders for their engagement, and we encourage continued participation as this process moves forward. So as we move ahead, my office will continue to review the information shared today, follow up on outstanding questions, work with SHPO, work with my colleagues, because our goal is to build a preservation framework that is transparent, protective, and reflective of our values as people of this island. So if you have any additional comments, questions, or concerns, please reach out to my office at the office of Senator Shelly Calvo at guamlegislature.gov or call 671-989-5682. Your continued participation is vital as we work toward solutions that honor our heritage and strengthen our preservation systems. Thank you again, and I'd like to give a shout out to future legislator, future Senator Santino Calvo. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Thank you for the panel, and thank you to my colleagues, and thank you to everyone who supported this hearing. And thank you for your commitment. And the time now is 4:35. I'm way so advanced, right? So 4:35 in the afternoon, and this meeting is now adjourned.